Hi everyone, it is Reese here and you join me again for another video, and today we're talking about perhaps not the most fun topic but one that I think is incredibly valuable and useful, which is dealing with rejection as an academic. And how should you respond if you're rejected from conferences, publications, etc. What should we do and what should we learn from it? So I think here a useful place to begin is by thinking about what rejection is not. So it's quite tempting. It's incredibly easy when you've been rejected to take it as a personal reflection, to take it as sort of a damning indictment of your ability as a scholar, as a thinker. And rejection is not that. It is quite simply an assessment of a piece of work that is in front of someone at a particular moment. And a rejection does not necessarily mean that a piece of work is even bad. So rejections can emerge from, say, a conference being oversubscribed and a book chat call for papers, but the paper is brilliant but doesn't quite fit. So it's not even necessarily saying that the work is bad, but it's simply saying that this thing that has been submitted at this time, for whatever reason, is not an appropriate fit for, or it won't work with whatever the call was. And that is all the rejection is. So if it's a rejection for a job, it's not a reflection on yourself as as an academic. It's simply a fact that these jobs are highly oversubscribed, and there is someone else who has fit the brief better on a particular day. Um, so rejection is so tempting to take rejection as sort of essentially a personal slight, as sort of a damning endorsement of your record. And I wanted to begin the video by stressing that rejection is never that, and to sort of try really hard not to think of it as that. So, building on this previous point, the fact that rejection happens to everyone, you will not meet an academic who has submitted stuff and has a 100% success rate. It is not something that happens. There's nothing wrong with that. As I say, these fields are highly competitive, and it is tough, and it's not always the case that work will always fit. It's not always the case that there is enough money in a pot to be able to give it to everyone. It is not always the say if lots of people apply for one job, only one person can get it. It is it's happens to everyone. I say you will not meet an academic who has received every single grant they've applied for, got every single thing they've submitted published, has been on every job that they've got and immediately got it. It's not something that happens. And if you speak to any academic, you will find tales of being rejected, and I could share many of my own. But that doesn't mean that essentially you're allowed to feel bad about it. Things suck. Submitting, putting a lot of time to a grant application, and then it failing even to pass the first stage, it's a massive kick in the teeth, and it's upsetting, it is. And putting all your stock into a job that you feel like the perfect fit for, only to be bumped because there's someone who's 10 years down the line and has more publications than you do. These things are tough, and you're allowed to feel bad about them, even if they happen to everyone, even though everyone has these stories. And they're rubbish. It is a rubbish feeling, and you're allowed to feel that. So although it is a shared experience, although you won't find an academic who doesn't have this, you're allowed to feel sad when it happens. What I would say though is sort of my next point, which is being sad is fine, but how do you build from it? How do you sort of transform the rejection into something hopefully positive? A key question that I would ask is, are you able to learn from and build on the rejection? And now, how this works is, broadly speaking, sort of comparatively easy depending on what the rejection is. So if it's a job interview, if it's a job application, and you come to a certain stage, you will inherently get feedback, which is very useful to know sort of what you can build on, what's worked, what's not. Similarly, if it's a grant application and you're not through, it's often the case that you'll get written notes on things that were identified as potentially weaker. Things might be scored. And if you've submitted a piece to a journal, say, that is rejected, often they will come with rejection notes, editor notes, or indeed sort of major suggestions for things that could change. So certain forms of academic rejection necessarily come with advice, feedback. The famous reviewer too, who is incredibly useful even despite their bad critical reputation. Other things like conferences often don't come with that because it's often a case of capacity issues or it not being a fit. And what I would say is that it is always worth, if you get a rejection, emailing or speaking directly if you can to whoever it was who rejected and asking for feedback, asking for advice, asking for and not the question not to ask is, I think, why was I rejected? The question to ask is, what can I build on? What things can I do to sort of better position me next time? And there are always things. Nobody is perfect. Even the people who get it, there are things they can build on. Having that sort of, being able to see it as sort of, this is a chance for me to sort of learn and develop something else. And it may be if you're turned down for I don't know, a job because you don't have enough publications again. This is something that you know that you have. This is a tangible goal that you can work on and build on. Even if it is sort of a rubbish feeling of being rejected, it is something that you can carry with you. So I think it is always worth asking why. Going further with that, so I mentioned asking for feedback and advice. This doesn't necessarily have to be from the people directly involved in a decision. So I would always be gauging, I think always gauging feedback and advice throughout a process is useful. When you're applying for something, get someone to look at your CV, get someone to look at your abstract, get someone to look at your work and get their feedback in advance. But if things are rejected, if you have advice, ask someone else then what they think of it. If you don't, ask them, look at this, say this was rejected. What are you seeing? What's not there? What am I not seeing? Often getting eyes that are sort of external to a situation, people who aren't involved in the application yourself or in the rejection, the funder slash institution slash conference organisers, whatever. Getting that advice is incredibly useful. Again, so if there are people you trust and people whose academic judgment you value, people in your field, people who can sort of give you that kind of impartial advice, or people who can give you informed advice, then it's worth asking for it. The last point I want to come back to, and it's one that is inherently true, and I've already mentioned, but I'm going to stress it, is that academia is such a competitive business, especially now also. Applying for grants, applying for jobs, is so tough. And I can attest to this. So I'm sort of in an early career. I'm unfortunate now to be in a role, and a good role, but the amount of rejection and failure I had along the way, from countless jobs where I got nothing in return, and simply as sort of that generic cut and paste email of thanks for applying. We've been bombarded, so you're getting no feedback whatsoever. I've applied to tons of grants, and you never make it past the first stage. Even when you feel like you're the natural fit, and then you look at sort of the things that are funded and don't get it. So I applied, as many people in my career position do, for a Leave a Hume Early Career Fellowship. When I was in the sort of the funding window for that, got nowhere with it. It's worth stating the funding for that is sort of a 6% success rate, so it's so competitive. Funding pots, they are limited by the money they have, and they will have so many more requests than they have money. And even things like journals, books, conferences, they're highly competitive because publications, conference presentations, etc., are the order of the day. I wanted to give you one last story to talk about sort of the competitiveness, and say again to stress that that doesn't mean things are bad. Rejections don't mean things are bad. So last year, a friend, Dr. Hannah Straw, and I organised the Terrified 2025 conference at Warwick, and we had to do this over 2 days. We were so oversubscribed. We had a second day. I think in the end we had about 25 to 30 papers that we were able to present, and we brought some more on as extra videos. But we had near to 300 submissions for the conference. It was so oversubscribed. And there were things we had to reject that were brilliant because we couldn't make them fit. And this is essentially a sort of a conference on one particular film series. The amount of different approaches and stuff we saw was incredible. So I'm saying this to sort of stress how competitive these things are. Rejections don't mean things are bad. They rarely mean things are bad. They often mean things are incredibly competitive. So keep plugging away at it is all I can say. Because it is a competitive game and you have to be in it to win it, even if being in it often comes with rejections. So there you are, everyone, a video on dealing with rejection as an academic, and hopefully some tips and ways to think about it that will make the inevitable when it happens, and it happens to us all, will make it be a little less unpleasant. Hopefully this has been useful. Please do feel free to share your stories below or comments, because this is a shared experience, and the more people see this, I think the more useful it is. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this one. I hope this has been useful. Make sure to like, subscribe, ring the bell so you know when a new video is coming, and comment below as well with any videos you'd like me to make. I want to make the stuff that you guys want to see. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here with me, and I will look forward to seeing you all in the next one.